Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar to provide a short update in terms of the main amendments that we have provided to the specifications since you would have all been on the acres training earlier on in the summer and again there in September. There's also an update then on the terms and conditions in terms of the draft terms and conditions that are available. So we'll go through that later on. So I hope acres planning is going reasonably well for people. We've been working hard over the last month or so to try and fine tune the questions and clarifications that people have been sending in. The acres inbox has received more than 5,000 queries into it in terms of seeking clarification. So we're trying to work through those. We're under quite a bit of pressure on the acres inbox. So we're trying to sort of coordinate, I suppose, the commonalities that are within those. And there in the last day or two, we put up a commonly asked question and answer session to try and address the main queries that are coming through the system. So for today, I won't hold up the agenda too much. We have 3 presentations. Dympna will provide an update there on the terms and conditions, followed Anne Cunningham then will give an update on the progress with the CP teams, and Aileen O'Flynn will give an update, the main presentation then on the specifications in terms of the key changes just to be aware of in the work on the LAM system. So with that, maybe I'll hand over to Dympna Furlong to commence the presentation. Dympna.
Hi, my name is Dympna Furlong, and I previously spoke to some of you in Carrick-on-Shannon, and my colleagues also spoke to you in Charleville and in Athlone. So the purpose of today's presentation is to give you is to give you an update on the draft terms and conditions for the acres scheme. And as you know, the draft terms and conditions were published on the department's website last Thursday, the 6th of October. So if you access gov.ie/acres, this is the screen that you will see. And the draft acres terms and conditions are item number 15 on that list. And there are certain areas to be finalised, including the part of Appendix 3 and Appendix 5. And so this, when you go into terms and conditions, we have a table of contents page, and this is what you will see. And I don't propose to go through each and every section of the draft terms and conditions, but for the purpose of today's presentation, I'm just going to give a quick overview of general provisions and the core requirements, eligibility, application process, but then also farm partnerships, acres and forestry, and acres and eco schemes. Now, the general provisions, as you are well aware at this stage, there's 2 approaches. There's acres general and acres cooperation. So this is the general provisions are in section 2 of the terms and conditions, and the 2 approaches, there's a description of each of them in section 4, and then the map for the acres cooperation is at Annex 1. Now, as you know, the acres general is available nationally outside of the high priority geographical area as defined for the acres cooperation approach. And the acres general offers a range of measures of both prescription and results based. And then there's the acres cooperation, which is available to farmers in defined high priority geographical areas. And my colleague Anne will be talking further on acres cooperation later in this webinar. In the general provisions, you should know that a farmer may only enter contract for one of the approaches, and the contracts are going to be for a minimum of 5 years, and like GLOS, participation in the scheme is voluntary. And this is what I just mentioned, and I'll reiterate that the acres general approach will be open to all categories of active farmers nationally outside the CP zones, and then the acres cooperation approach will be open to all categories of active farmers eligible in a defined mapped area. And there are certain areas if your land falls in or outside, so Anne will go through that as well. So the acres core requirements, these are in section 6 of the draft terms and conditions. And one of the core requirement is the engagement of an approved acres advisor. And later on in the terms and conditions, it will be noted an advisor cannot prepare or submit an application or a results-based scoring in respect of his or her own business ID or on behalf of a family member. And another core requirement is the preparation of the farm sustainability plan, which, as John mentioned, you're probably already engaged in. And then a requirement is that the acres cooperation project participants must engage and work with acres cooperation project teams. Another requirement is the attendance at training course. Acres training is mandatory in the first year of participation in the scheme, and the participants in the Acres cooperation approach must attend any additional mandatory trainings organised by the CP teams from time to time. And then, like GLOS, there's also record keeping. The eligibility requirements for acres, these are in section 7 of the draft terms and conditions. So to be eligible to participate, a farmer must be aged 18 years or over on date of submission of the application, be the holder of an active business ID and meet the definition of an active farmer, have all lands farmed declared in the applicant's name on the department's IAC system, have submitted a BPS 2021 application, and all scheme lands must be declared in the applicant's 2022 BPS and in BIS for the subsequent year's participation, and there's no double funding. And by this we mean, well, we mean it across the board, but in this context, it's farmers participating in other environmental schemes may apply for acres, but if approved, they may have payments adjusted in either scheme to ensure no double funding takes place. So advice should be sought from the department if there are any doubts about compatibility of any scheme. Then moving on to the application process, and you're all probably familiar with the various steps here. There's the access agreement, the farm sustainability plan, and then the acres application. And then in due course, there's a ranking and selection process. This is outlined in section 13 of the draft terms and conditions, and the criteria for the ranking selection for acres general is in appendix 3 of the draft terms and conditions, and the ranking selection for the acres CP is currently being finalised, and that will be in the terms and conditions in due course. And as regards the application process, there will be there's going to be a pre-recorded video available online after the webinar about the application process. Now, going into the application procedure, this is covered in section 8 of the draft terms and conditions, and then the tier structure and the eligibility for each tier for acres general is shown in annex 2A of the terms and conditions. So there's far too much information for me to go through on this webinar, so I suggest that you could check it out there in annex 2A. Then, as regards the application, it must be completed by an approved acres advisor, and once again, you cannot submit your own application. Now, this application procedure, as I said, is covered in section 8 of the terms and conditions. So the application must be accompanied by the farm sustainability plan. All applications are made based on an individual business ID, and a farmer may only submit one application. And then the annual payment claim forms part of the annual application under the basic income for support for sustainability. Basic income support for sustainability, this scheme. And then the BIS and the acres deadlines must be abided by. And then there's owned, leased or rented land is allowed as long as in control for the scheme duration. And then all applications must be digitised and claimed on BIS. Now, it's also in the terms and conditions that where a parcel is split, the area in which must be digitised as a lifeless parcel. And then the new digitised parcels must be claimed in BIS for the following and subsequent years before the contract can be processed for payment. So parcels that are split may delay a participant's payments as the digitised process takes place. Now, the other provisions in section 8 is what date determines the eligibility for people applying under tier 1 as a registered organic farmer or as a member of a rare breed society, and under tier 2 as regards participation in forestry schemes. So they're also mentioned in section 8 and also stated in the tier table in annex 2A. As regards a participant must be familiar and comply with the scheme terms and conditions and specifications, meet the deadlines throughout the schemes, be responsible for the implementation of the scheme commitments, and ensure any relevant documentation is provided for release of payments. And being familiar and complying with the scheme terms and conditions and specifications, it is important for a participant to be so familiar, and also the consequences for breaches or non-compliances. And the penalty schedule will be added to the draft terms and conditions at annex 5 in due course. Now, as regards acres and partnerships, they must be registered with the department and submit a BPS BIS in the same name for the duration of the scheme. And then all partnerships are jointly responsible for delivery of the scheme. And so eligibility of the partnership for tierage will be based on one of the holdings forming the partnership or on the entire registered farm partnership holding meeting the predefined criteria. And then a partnership may attract the maximum annual payment, be it 7,311 for the acres general or the 10,500 for the acres CP, multiplied by the number of holdings up to a maximum of 3 such holdings. So then this wasn't in GLAS, it's the acres and forestry, and it's section 15 of the current draft terms and conditions. And like GLAS, opportunities will exist for afforestation and other forestry schemes on parcels which are not in acres. But a parcel which an acres action is situated may subsequently be split to facilitate afforestation. Now, for acres, a department may authorise an action undertaken as part of participant's acres contract to be terminated or its area adjusted before its normal end date without penalty or full reimbursement of funding already paid during its period of operation under certain limited circumstances. And those limited circumstances are stated in the draft terms and conditions. And in the context of seeking to terminate an action, see also section 24(7) of the terms and conditions. And it's important to note where land is afforested during the course of a contract year, the payment will only be made for the dates the action, which is the subject to termination, is in place. Now, there's the Forestry Act 2014 controls forestry. So the forest creation measures are exempted from the requirement of obtaining an afforestation licence under the Forestry Act 2014. However, forests and trees planted under the acre scheme are afforded protection by the Forestry Act 2014. And so that a felling licence may be required to fell or otherwise remove trees that have been planted as part of acres. So for that reason, a farmer or a landowner who is thinking of doing that are strongly advised to contact the Forestry Division of the Department to ensure that they comply with the tree felling licence requirements before any work begins. Then eco schemes, as you know, in the green architecture, there's conditionality, then the eco schemes, and then there's the agri-environment scheme, which in our case is acres. And so the payments will only provide under acres in respect of actions that are different and go beyond commitments granted under eco schemes. So as I mentioned before, about double funding has to be avoided. So where commitments are similar under both eco schemes and acres, there's a risk of double funding, and the acres payment for the action will be reduced accordingly to avoid double funding. So for 2023, the only action where that relates is where an acres participant selects agriculture practice 3, which is limiting chemical nitrogen usage, having already selected ryegrass seed set as one of his or her actions on the acres. A reduced payment rate for the ryegrass seed set will apply. So instead of €137 per metre, the reduced payment rate will be €131 per metre. And that was a very brief overview of the draft terms and conditions, but you're strongly advised to read the terms and conditions, as there are a lot of sections and a lot of areas are covered. So, but any queries can be sent into Acres General at the acres@agriculture.gov.ie, to Acres Cooperation at acrescp@agriculture.gov.ie. Once again, the draft terms and conditions are available on the gov.ie/acres on that website, and then the 2 addresses for correspondence are there on the left-hand side of the screen. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dympna. Very comprehensive overview of the terms and conditions. And again, the important point is that all this information will be put on the department's website under that acres section in terms of being able to access it afterwards, as will this webinar be available for anyone that doesn't get to connect during the session that we have presently. I suppose in terms of questions and answers, we won't take them now. We'll take all questions and answers when the 3 presentations are complete. So for anyone that has questions, please use the questions tab that's on the webinar here in terms of posting your questions to be dealt with.